you, Jo.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try and be really brief. So if anyone has questions, please ask. There is nothing that is going to embarrass me or that that I won't answer. Really brief outline of my caring story is that during lockdown, I have 3 children and the middle one was doing her GCSEs and she got ill. We didn't know it at the time, mentally ill. And when she came out the other side, or when we all came out the other side, we got her into some private therapy and various issues were raised at that point. One of them was you need to get her assessed for autism and ADHD. It was something that we'd thought we should have possibly done when she was younger, but she was achieving academically and in lots of other ways at school. So my husband said, what's the point of doing that for her? I think if I knew what I knew now then, I would have done it when she was younger, but didn't seem to affect her in the same way that I suspect it doesn't affect him, although he doesn't have a formal diagnosis. Anyway, we started that process and she did get diagnosed with autism at the same time as being diagnosed with anorexia. Now, we'd been told she had disordered eating, and of course there's lots of autistic behaviours that go along with eating disorders, so it was extremely complicated and is still complicated. So she collapsed in the February of 2022, which in a way made things very easy because she was super ill and we could just pull her straight out of school. I happened to have a friend who lived locally whose daughter was about 9 months ahead of us. And by fluke, she and I ended up chatting and I thought, before she got the diagnosis, this is what's happening. And so I had somebody who was that far ahead in the process who knew how everything worked. So when the GP said, no, it's definitely not anorexia, for example, she would say, you do X, Y, and Z, which is why we got a quick diagnosis and why we got on the right track. And Molly was accepted at CAMS up in Winchester for treatment, and we had family therapy there. We were very well supported. And when she turned 18, she was transferred to April House in Southampton, which is the adult eating disorder service. And everyone probably has a general idea that eating disorders affect little white 18-year-old girls. And if you go to April House, they will tell you that that's absolutely not the case. This is a really long-term disease. It isn't a fad. It isn't something that's caused by social media. It is extremely complicated, and it is, for some people, a lifelong condition. So with that said, as a carer of somebody with an eating disorder, there are as many ways of dealing with it as there are carers. And for us, what I decided to do was to stop work, to be with her, to feed her myself here rather than get her admitted to hospital, because that was the stage we were at. And it means that you are feeding somebody who does not want to be fed 6 times a day. So that sort of sounds okay because we have a snack or we have lunch and maybe it takes 10 minutes. But that's not how it works if you've got an eating disorder, because what you're doing is giving somebody what is their medicine, but essentially they are absolutely horrified at having to deal with their greatest fear. So I've only just thought of this the other day actually, but there's a scene in one of the Harry Potters where Harry has to give Dumbledore some liquid from a sort of chalice thing, right? And Dumbledore says, whatever I say, you just have to keep going. And I'm going to say horrible things. I'm going to tell you not to do it, but you have to just keep doing it, whatever I say. And that's what you're doing. Only you sit for an hour maybe with them while they're trying to have a snack at 10:30 in the morning. And then you realise it's 11:30, nearly 12, and you're going into making some lunch and you sit down for another hour, but sometimes they take another hour and then you're bleeding in. Your whole day centres around the kitchen table. So I remember asking my husband, can you just get me The Guardian on Saturday? It was, my little lifeline of excitement for the week. And he'd just sometimes say, oh, no. I think, well, how am I? He said, just read it online. It's like, I don't want to read it online. I want my little thing for the week. And it sounds so ridiculous that my friend whose daughter was ill too was saying, I'll just bring it to you. It became a thing, a stupid thing. But that's how trapped you are. And, after she was first diagnosed, I was sleeping in with her, because I was frightened that she was going to have a heart attack in the middle of the night. you're listening to her breathing in a way that you haven't since they were born. You know, it's just all consuming. And in some ways, you know, you can deal with it, but if you have other children, what do you do with them? I mean, I was lucky. One of them had already gone to university and the other one was at home, but I have a partner and he looked after him. And, you know, they were excluded from the initial process of trying to heal her physically. Because another thing with eating disorders is you assume everyone's small and when they get bigger, that's fine, they're all done. But that's, you know, they're ill in terms of their physicality at the point when they are at their worst. The disease is with you, whatever size you are. You don't have to be small to be anorexic or have an eating disorder. And that's one of another classic misconception, because actually, though she is weight restored now, those thoughts are still in her head. She's been discharged from all services. She's due to go to university in September, which is brilliant. But even now, she will share anorexic thoughts with me as and when they crop up. And they are, say, you know, once or twice a week. And she's made a categorical decision to recover because she has to get away. I've been annoying enough that she is desperate to never repeat that process, which is a win-win as far as I'm concerned. But I'm also really realistic. This is the first time we've been round what is called, they call the wheel of recovery, essentially. You go round it and hopefully you come out at some point. Now, we've done this once. There are people who are in their 70s who've been trying to get out of this trap for decades. It's horrific. And as a carer, for someone like me, it's not so bad. I am educated. I read a lot. I ask questions. I keep going until I get what I need from somebody, whatever that may be. And that's fine for me. But there's a lady called Wendy Lee. I don't know if she's on this call, actually, from a charity called Options Wellbeing. And she always says, we've done a couple of talks to student nurses in Southampton. It's all very well for someone like me because I'm able to push. But there are many more people underneath that iceberg who are just hanging on because they can't give up work, yet they're trying to manage it. Or it's a child that they have who is an adult themselves, who have their own children, or it's their partner, their wife, their husband, whoever it is. It's just complicated and it's hard. And the minute they think it's over, they want to forget it. And I genuinely do not blame them. It is horrific. And I've been asked lots of different questions by people like student nurses or other carers. And in fact, probably some of you guys who I've met on calls with Southern Health before. But I'm really happy to answer anything. It's just, I was lucky. And I think that's why I'm able to speak out. It's our first time round with this. We were lucky, we were supported. The NHS was able to offer us the things that we needed at the right time, mainly because we weren't in some kind of COVID lockdown. My friend couldn't get any services because of that and coped by themselves and had to pay for care. You know, that's another kettle of fish altogether, isn't it? But it's, you know, I've said this before, and I apologise for people who've heard this, but people do not pop round with a casserole if you have a child with an eating disorder or a partner with an eating disorder. You're on your own. And loads of those people are still, you know, alone and isolated in their little bushes. And I don't know how you get to them apart from, you know, April House, the adult eating disorder service in Southampton, is putting on their first carers event this week. They've never done it before, don't particularly know why, but it's basically open house for people who are transferring their kids from CAMS to adult services, because that's quite the transition. It's awful because there are some terrible Google reviews on that service, terrible photographs, you know, very basic things that in the private sector you just wouldn't see or you'd be able to solve overnight. But for the NHS, it's super difficult. And of course, for as many people there are like me who, whether or not the service within the NHS is perfect, is a resolve to figure this out. You know, this is a problem to be solved. I know realistically we're in it. It's a marathon, not a sprint, which is a bit of a cliche, but it is. But everyone that I've met within the service has tried their best to provide clear and direct service for me and my daughter, you know. But as for other carers coming in, sometimes the language or the information is sort of it's not plain English, if that makes sense. So there are lots of names and acronyms and ways of doing things, which I was lucky enough. I had the Polton's Park Fast Pass. You know, my friend knew what she had to do to get her daughter the treatment, or would have got the treatment if had it not been COVID. So I had a little, you know, Jiminy Cricket leading me the right way. I never took a wrong turn off that train track. We went straight through. And if we come out of this first time round, it is down to, you know, I thank my friend, and I do, and she gets embarrassed, but it was down to her, because there's no easy way through it. And if you have a child with a diagnosis like autism, where there's lots of comorbidities, there are other issues going on for her, not just the eating disorder, many things. And unraveling that ball of wool, those strings, takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And if you are a carer doing that, whether it's an eating disorder or anything else, I just think take every bit of support that you can get. And you may not need it today, but you might need it in a month's time. And that's it, really. If anyone has any questions, I'm really happy to answer anything.